Wow. Well, my mind is blown, and I'm sure if anybody has made it to the end of this video after an hour and 20 some minutes, gosh, thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. Today we are talking mitochondrial DNA with Roberta Estes. She is the scientist behind some of the recent updates for the mitochondrial DNA, and she's here to explain it all. If you are new here, my name is Connie Knox, but we are here to welcome Roberta. So welcome to the program.
Welcome, and thank you for having me.
All right. So maybe you can briefly explain mitochondrial DNA for people who are like, I have no idea what Connie's talking about.
Well, first of all, we're talking about genealogy here. And mitochondrial DNA is the DNA that you inherit from your mother. And she got it from her mother, and she got it from her mother. So it comes directly down the line of females, and it's not mixed with the DNA of any of the fathers. So when you're talking about autosomal DNA, which is the more typical DNA that people test, it gets mixed from both parents. So you don't know which ancestor it comes from. But mitochondrial DNA is different because it comes directly from your mother's line as far back as you can go with genealogy. So it gives us a view of where that person came from, where their ancestors were, where the people you match, where their ancestors were from. So let's say that you don't know anything about that line, or you don't know much, like back to your grandparents, okay? And you don't know beyond that. But you have a rumor in your family that your mother's up there somewhere was Native American. And so you test your mitochondrial DNA, and you expect to have what we call a Native American haplogroup. Haplogroup, think of it as your genetic clan, okay? But you don't. It's European. So what you have just been able to determine is that the rumor that this person was genetically Native American is inaccurate, at least on her mother's side. That doesn't mean on another side, because we're looking at one side in particular, means she was European. So what that does is that allows you to look at your matches and where they were from and say, okay, my grandmother was from this place in Tennessee. And so maybe if I find her grandmother and look, this person over here, their grandmother's from the same county. So maybe there's a genealogy match. So that's one way that we can use mitochondrial DNA, because we don't have to figure out where it came from. And then let's say, for example, that it's not Native American. So we put that rumor to rest for that person's mother's line, but it's German. And how do we know it's German? Because a lot of other people that we match and that have that same haplogroup, their ancestors are from Germany. So now we're like, oh, is there a German population that maybe migrated to that area? And my own line, my direct matrilineal line, is German. My mother's. And I know which village in Germany in the 1600s, and I've done a lot of research because I'm like a 40-year genealogist here. I literally did start when I was a kid. But
You and me both.
yeah. So it's German, and I know they're German. I have all the records, and so I tested mine and my mother's mitochondrial DNA before she passed. Guess what? My matches are all in Scandinavia. I know. I did the same thing you just did. I'm like, what? No, I know this can't be true. And I had a couple, one in Poland, but I have this huge cluster in Scandinavia. I'm like, how is that possible? Okay, let's look at the history of Germany, of the place where my mother's ancestors are from. Well, the last record I have, it took place during the 30 Years' War in the 1600s, just before that, or just after that, because the records were burned during the 30 Years' War. The armies came through and they burned the churches and all the records, and we just don't have any records before that in Germany. So that's our brick wall. Well, guess who came through that part of Germany? In fact, through that town? The Swedish army. and they had baggage trains. And what are baggage trains? They are supplies, and women came with the army to do woman things like laundry, cooking, and childbearing. And somebody somehow got left behind or married a local person or with a baby that who knows what. But
Right.
somehow my ancestors, whose ancestors were from Sweden, somehow they're tied in there. I don't know exactly when or how, but I know the history of the area. I know where my mother's ancestors were from. And because the new haplogroup has ages, the new Mitotree haplogroup has ages associated with when that haplogroup was formed, I know it was formed not long before that in Scandinavia. So that's from mitochondrial DNA testing. And the part I knew was the German part. I actually matched a couple of cousins, one of which I didn't know I had, but then we found out we came from the same person. One I did know, but what I could never have found out without this testing was the part before Germany. I could never have found it. It's impossible.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
Awesome story. So, just for everybody at home to understand, you were not going to find mitochondrial DNA on Ancestry or some of the other platforms. We're only going to find it on FamilyTreeDNA, correct?
Correct. Yes, they're the only company. They've been in business 25 years this year, I think, and they actually started with Y-DNA and mitochondrial DNA. Y-DNA is the Y chromosome for the male paternal line, just like mitochondrial for the matrilineal line. They started with that before autosomal DNA was even a thing in the genealogy space. So they're still the only company that offers that. And the important part of that is not only what you can find, but the matching to other people so that you can make those connections. I call it the puddle jumper because it it will help you jump the pond. If you don't know where your ancestor came from, one of the only ways, if you don't know, you don't know where to look, right? You don't have a surname, or you have a surname, but you're stuck in a county in Pennsylvania or wherever. The only way you can jump that pond is to match with other people that have the same genetics that you do, and it'll help you jump the pond. And sometimes it'll give you connections to people that have information you don't. For example, I'm part of the Million Mito team, as you mentioned. So for the new tree that just came out. And when it was in beta, I was working with I collect my ancestors' haplogroups, because everyone is a story that can't be told any other way. So I find people that can test for that ancestor, and I do exactly that. I test them for that ancestor. So I was going through these and I solved like 3 brick walls. I broke through them. And one of them I was able to break through because I had my ancestor back to a particular place and time, and it matched this other lady. And we're like, okay, this is too much to be coincidence. And so she had more information than I did. She had a surname. And so then when we started looking, we found the documents that actually mentioned my ancestor, but we didn't know that because we didn't have my ancestor's surname, so I didn't know where to look. So when we were able to put those two together, then because we had the surname, she had 3 more generations. So not only did I break through the brick wall of where my ancestor was from, I have 3 more generations because of the collaboration with another tester that I matched that I couldn't have done otherwise. So
Awesome.
it's just the opportunity out there is just amazing.
So let me ask you this. We're kind of back up just a little bit to talk about some of the terminology. So for those who are fairly new to DNA, and especially mitochondrial DNA, what is a haplogroup? They're going to be like, what is this tree you're talking about?
Mutations happen slowly over time in mitochondrial and Y-DNA both. And when they do, let's say a woman 2,000 years ago, her daughter had a mutation, okay? Between the mother and the daughter, a mutation happened. So that mutation is passed to every child in that woman's lineage. Only women pass it on, men get it, but then the children have the wife's mitochondrial DNA. So let's say that they have that mutation. So everybody in that line has that mutation. So we give that line a name, if you will. It's a scientific name. And the name is a haplogroup. So let's say that that woman's haplogroup, the original woman 2,000 years ago, was J1C because we'd already haplogroup J was formed J1, J1C. So now that woman has another mutation that's passed to one of her daughters. The other daughter doesn't have it. Okay. So now the daughter without it is still just J1C, but the daughter with the new mutation is J1C something else. So let's say it's 2. Okay. And then in another 1,000 years, another mutation happens and it branches, and that one's F. So I'm actually J1C2F. So that's how the branching is named. So you can think of it as being a name of a woman who lived a long time ago because we don't have her name. And I call them genetic clans because everyone in that branch or in that clan has that haplogroup name. It's important back in time because we can track them. We can say, okay, all of haplogroup J was found in Europe, okay, for example, or it was part of the hunter-gatherers that came from the Levant to Europe, or whatever the story is. So every haplogroup and every branch has its own story. And one of the things that we released with the Mitotree was something called mtDNA Discover. And there's 15 reports that you can look at, and it shows you the map that your ancestors took to get wherever you found them. In the United States, or in the Americas, I shouldn't say United States, Native American people have a map there, but everybody else stops in Europe or Asia because in the United States, it's really difficult to track, because that's where a lot of people are brick walled, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So for now, it stops before you get to the Americas, except for Native American haplogroups.
I do want to show that here in just a minute, but I had a question. So you said that the family lore is that you had Native American ancestry, but your mitochondrial line showed German. This is the mother's. So could some of that Native American have come from your mother's father's line branching off in a different direction, not mitochondrial?
So it's really interesting that you mentioned that because, first of all, yes, but let me tell you the story. So my mother's grandfather, okay, who married the granddaughter of the German woman, okay, his father's line was Acadian. So that's French, English, native from Nova Scotia, okay?
Okay.
So the Native American woman is in my mother's side, but it's in her grandfather's father's lineage from Nova Scotia. How do I know that? Because remember, I collect my ancestors' mitochondrial DNA. We found it. So I have Native American autosomal segments myself. So did my mother. So I know it. I know that I actually do on my father's side too, but that's a whole other story. So my mother's side, we knew it was there somewhere, and the rumor was wrong. Okay, we proved that. And I now know, because I've done all the genealogy, where that all came from. But when we started looking at tracking the segment specs, where did those native segments come from? They came from him. And it's like, okay, where did he come from? And when I had the breakthrough that I found out he was Acadian, then I could look at the Y and mitochondrial DNA because they both have Native American haplogroups that are specific to only Native American people. I'm like, no, not that one, not that one, not that one, European. Oh, look, that one's native. And then sure enough, when I started mapping my segments back, I proved that those segments came from that woman from Nova Scotia who is Native American.
Oh my gosh, we could go down so many rabbit holes about segment size and all of that.
I know. And the thing is, these things all work together for genealogists. They're all separate tools that we use together in combination with our records research. So it's like a four-legged stool. There's Y-DNA. Even if you don't carry it as a female, you can find males that carry it appropriately. There's mitochondrial DNA for not only you, but all of your your female ancestors. There's autosomal DNA for you. And then there's the records research that we all did before DNA testing even became available. So it's really all four of those things put together.
Okay, so let's briefly, before I show my mitochondrial DNA results here, let's briefly talk about this new haplotree that you announced just recently, kind of during the Roots Tech conference. Tell us what's going on there.
I'm so excited about this, and partly because I'm one of the scientists that is on the team. So 5 years ago in 2020 at Roots Tech, we announced the Million Mito Project. And the reason we announced it and what it is that there's a reference tree. So we don't make up haplogroups on the fly. They started back in 1980. It's like, oh, there's this mutation, it's this branch, and the branch just started having names. And then for a long time, about once a year, something called FamilyTree was updated by actually one man in an organization. And in 2016, the last FamilyTree was updated with then the latest haplogroups based on multiple people in a branch matching. And then nothing happened and nothing happened. And we didn't hear from him and we all waited. And finally, after 4 years in 2020, we're like, okay, this isn't going to be updated again. So FamilyTreeDNA, I talked to Bennett Greenspan. I'm like, you have the most samples because you're the only company that does testing, right? You have more samples internally than any place else in the world. So, I mean, you could do this. You have more resources than even FamilyTree looking at academic papers. So you could do this. You could update the tree. And he was kind of looking at me. He says, "Well, Roberta, just do it." I'm like, "Wait, I can't do this myself. You have to do this. It has to be FamilyTreeDNA because you have access to the resources." So we announced it 5 years ago at Roots Tech, and it was a real challenge because one of the problems we encountered was the fact that FamilyTree never documented how they constructed the tree. They never documented the rules that they used. So the first thing that we had to do was reverse engineer FamilyTree until we got the same results that they got. And then we made discoveries that were both challenging and groundbreaking. So we found another lineage out of Africa, for example, that had never been documented, very, very early in lineage. But that shifted the whole tree. So when you have a branch split way high in a branch, it splits the whole tree. So then how do you name it? Do you change all the names? How do you handle that? Yeah, we're kind of like, okay, we want to maintain what we have for continuity, but then it looks like some of the branches aren't named contiguously, which actually they're not because we didn't want to change everybody's whole haplogroup name. So we had those challenges. We had challenges that we discovered that some mutations aren't reliable enough to actually be used for branching, and they had been in the past. So it's like, now what do we do with that? So there were a lot of scientific challenges that the team had to address during this. And then in addition to that, we didn't want to just release this with a new name and then people was like, great, what do I do with this? So we introduced 15 new reports. I think it's 15, maybe it's 13. A bunch of new reports with mtDNA Discover, like the time tree, which shows you when your haplogroup was formed. Now people have haplotype clusters too, which is a whole brand new thing. So just because you have the same haplogroup doesn't mean you actually have all the same mutations downstream. And you may not have there may not be another haplogroup, but there's a cluster. And why is there a cluster and not a haplogroup? Because those mutations aren't stable enough yet. They're not stable enough to be sure to name a haplogroup. Haplogroup is like casting it in concrete. So let's say you and I have a match. We have the same haplogroup, but we have two matches different, but we still have the same haplogroup. So you might be in a cluster of people you match exactly, and I might be in a different cluster of people I match exactly, but we still might share an ancestor a few generations ago because those mutations aren't stable. So we introduce new concepts like that to help people with their genealogy. And I want to share with you something that happened at Roots Tech. It was actually really fun. This lady runs up to me in the hallway, and pretty much everybody at Roots Tech, well, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people know I've been working on this. It's been my thing for a long time, especially if they follow my blog. We had just released the new Mitotree the week before. Okay, so we're at Roots Tech. So he runs up to me in the hallway. I don't know her, but that's not. She's like, Roberta. I'm like, yes. And she's like, I broke through my brick wall. It's all one breathless sentence, so I'm going to have to take a couple breaths. She goes, I had like 47 matches and I didn't know what to do, but now I had only 3, and so I could focus. And so then I looked, and one of them had a tree, but the other one didn't, but she didn't have very much in her tree, so I did her tree, and guess what? I found out that her great-great-grandmother and my great-great-grandmother were sisters. Then, oh my God, I broke through the brick wall. Bye, I gotta go. And she gave me a hug and ran down the hallway. I have no
Oh,
idea
that
who
is.
this woman was. I just kind of stood there.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so if you're watching, lady,
Yeah.
please put it in the comment sections. We
Get
want to
in
hear from you.
touch because I'd love
Yeah.
to document that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
who the heck? What's that? I was standing there with my cousin and he's like, who was that? I'm like, I have no idea. But she was so excited
Oh,
because
that's so fun.
she found the connection for her great or how some greats. I don't remember because it was pretty quick, happened pretty quickly. Some
Right.
number of greats, grandmother, sister, something, and now she's got more than she did before. And she was extremely excited. And that's the power of the new tree, the new haplogroups, the new clusters, the time tree, the mapping. There's just so much there now to help genealogists with their mitochondrial DNA results.
I love it. I love it. All right, let me share my tree here. So this is the homepage for those who are new to FamilyTreeDNA and have never been here before. So we've got autosomal DNA, which is the same thing you would find on Ancestry and some of the other, MyHeritage. This is the broad tree. Here is my mtDNA. Of course, I don't have Y-DNA because I'm a girl. Down here, we got a couple badges. Classic and beta. Is this?
Mm-hmm. So the beta is your new one because the tree's still in beta at this point.
So
And
this takes me to the Discover tab that you were talking about.
yes, actually, the Discover tab is available either through the little sign that I think it's called a placard, or this mtDNA Discover, or it's actually publicly available, but you get more through your test than you could in the public version. So, yep, that's it right there.
Okay. I love the visualization. I was working through some of these tabs earlier, and this is really cool in explaining how a lot of this works. And so kudos to the team there.
So if you look on the left-hand side over here, you're at Haplogroup Story. That's the first tab, and it's also the first chapter in your book, if you think of it as a book about you. So it tells you, this is an overview. It's like, this is where the haplogroup was formed. This is where it was formed. This is when it was formed. You have a confirmed full sequence test. So you're not in the public side, you're in the side from your dashboard, so you get more information there. 34 tested descendants. There's other branches down here. You can see the other branches there. If there's unnamed branches yet, that's there. Oh, good. Thank you for scrolling down. It shows you where your haplogroup is when it was formed, the metal age versus this. So there's a lot of information here. And there's also the ability to share, if you want to share your results, like on social media or with your cousin or whatever, there's the ability to do that there without compromising any privacy stuff. So that's a really good thing.
Very cool. So what is this whole page? Is this whole thing new?
Yes, for mitochondrial DNA. It's been available for Y-DNA for some time for the big Y testers, but for mitochondrial DNA, this is completely new. The country frequency, which is what you've clicked on, shows you where the ancestors of the people you match are found. So people are asked to complete 2 things, the earliest known ancestor and the country in which, the location where they were found. Not everybody does that, unfortunately. I hope everybody hearing this, if you do one thing, go complete your earliest known ancestor, the country and location where they were found. And if you have a tree, please upload it or connect it or do whatever you need to do to get a tree on there, because that helps your matches and you, because it helps us refine this information. So you have matches not only in the United States, but from right there. Yes, in the UK, and it says less than 1%, but that's normal because it's never a high percentage. I'd kind of like to change that verbiage, but
Well, in the grand scheme of things, too, there's a lot less mitochondrial DNA test takers out there than there are autosomal, which everybody has, right?
right. And what this actually tells you, the 1%, is that less than 1% of the people in the UK have your haplogroup, which of
Okay.
course they do. There's a lot of different haplogroups. So that's what that's telling you. And then if you really wanted to see another haplogroup up here, this is your track backwards in time. If you look at to the right and the top of see that there, you're the little red icon under T2C1. That's you right there. Okay. So you came from T2, which came from T, which came from JTRN. So this is your track back in time listing major haplogroups to mitochondrial Eve, which is the first woman who actually lived and had descendants. So there are probably many other women living at the same time, but they don't have descendants that we can track like this individually. So that is your track back in time. And if you clicked on one of those, you could see that information for any of those as well.
I could click on these?
I do believe so.
Not clicking.
Not clicking.
How about
Okay.
table view?
There you go. And this just shows you these are the different locations. So I want to point out this Native American one. This is a really good example. I couldn't have set this up any better. So these are the countries of the people who you match in this haplogroup, okay? They may not be on your matches page because you might have too many differences to be considered a match, too many private variants. But the haplogroup, this is why. So we have United States, which, okay, a bunch of people are brick walled here. There's England. Okay. There's Scotland. There's UK, which, as we know, that's a different, incorporates England, Scotland, and I think Northern Ireland. But United States, Native American, what does this tell you? It tells you that somebody else had the rumor that their ancestor was Native American and they put that in. And they haven't either read enough about their haplogroup to understand that it's not, or they didn't think to go back and change it. But there's also one other possibility that I do want to mention. The native tribes sometimes adopted people into the tribe. So you may find your ancestor living among the five civilized tribes or the Cherokee rolls. And if you look further, you may find them mentioned as like half Cherokee or something. And it could be because they adopted somebody into the tribe. So this might not be a case of it's completely wrong. It may just, or it may be. It may be that they, like I did, originally documented, oh, that's my Native American line. Or they don't realize that the matrilineal line is your mother's 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 mother. They're thinking your maternal line, which is that whole half of your tree. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I got Native American ancestor in there. So that's given that there's people from other parts of the world here, it's very unlikely that this person is Native American because otherwise you wouldn't have people with England, Scotland, and UK. And you don't have too many here. There's a lot with unknown origin. That means that they didn't enter any information. They may actually not know, or they just may not have entered the information.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's go on to this. This is a beautiful map. Unless you want to talk more about.
No. Notable connections are really fun. And, we almost didn't do this because people are like, is this genealogically relevant? But people really like this. So what a notable connection is we've taken ancient DNA where it's published in academic papers or people who are famous or infamous, like Jesse James, for example, and when we know their haplogroup, we have written a little couple paragraphs about them, included a fun picture, and shown how you connect with them. So in this case, your haplogroup T, which is fairly unusual, it's fairly rare haplogroup.
Hey, I like to think of myself as a unique individual.
That's right. You're special. You're special.
It's special.
Actually, you're fortunate because people in haplogroup H, which is the most common, they have so many matches, they're overwhelmed, So what this is these are other people in haplogroup T. So look at the warrior woman here. Look at the Burka Viking warrior woman, second from the left on the top. Yeah, look here. That's a burial.
Wow.
Yeah, you're related to her. And you know what? When they first dug her up, they thought it was a male because it was a warrior, so and then they did testing like, oops, female. So
I
yeah,
love the fact that they're starting to, I don't know how long this has been going on, but I remember thinking about this a decade ago. If archaeology and genealogy were going to converge so that
mhm.
we could start seeing, those stories about people being buried under a parking lot in England. And, I
King
just,
King
go ahead.
Richard III. That's King
Yep.
Richard. Yep, yep. Absolutely. He's in here somewhere. I don't remember his haplogroup. But when you use the public version of this, so let's say you know that your father's mother's haplogroup was T2B from, someplace, you can go in the public version, but you'll only get, I think, 2 notable connections. But through your dashboard, like you've done when you actually test, I think you get what, 10? I don't remember the number, but you get significantly more. And then it tells you how closely up here. Everybody gets Neanderthal, by the way. That's the oldest one in the database. So
Okay.
everybody gets that, and it tells you your shared ancestor with Neanderthal man lived 379,000 years ago at the top there. So it's just
Gosh,
fun.
you guys have done some great work here. This is fun.
It is.
All right. I don't want to bore anybody else with my notable connections. Let's move on.
Yeah, I was going to say there's fun ones coming. There's fun ones coming. So this is your migration map, and it shows out of Africa where mitochondrial Eve lived near the Rift Valley. I did some of that research with haplogroup L7 when we discovered the new haplogroup. We learned more about mitochondrial Eve in that during that time frame and published a paper about it. But so here is your map where mitochondrial Eve, the area where she lived, and how do we know this? It's the mutations. It's where all these clusters of mutations are and are not found. So here's the map out of Africa through the Fertile Crescent and then into across the Levant here through the area by Syria, Turkey, along the coastline into Europe, and then where your ancestors are found for the haplogroup. So there's going to be a more detailed map coming soon called Globe Trekker. It says it's in beta today. I'm sorry, it says coming soon, not in beta. And what it will do is it'll have a little person walking, and then you can stop at any place and it'll also show you other things. Now, the other fun thing on this map I want to point out, see the little shovel on the map? That's where the ancient, see, we don't have shovels in Africa, but they're in Europe and there's one there on the coast and there. See the little shovels? Those are all ancient DNA remains where they
Oh,
were
wow.
found. Yeah. So it just shows you where there's been remains found, and you can look at those if you're interested. So that's
How
fun.
fun. Oh, I see a bunch of them up here now.
Yeah, a
I
lot
didn't
more in
realize.
Europe. Africa was not conducive to preserving DNA and remains, the climate there. And plus the remains in Europe are much newer than the ones in Africa, the old ones. So that's why there's more in Europe than Africa.
How fun.
Mhm.
We're going to jump over Globe Trekker because it's still
Yep.
coming soon.
Yep.
Ancient connections.
I love these. This is my favorite part. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't have a favorite part, but I actually really do love these. So the ancient connection, notable connections sometimes do include some like the Viking warrior women, but you'll also find famous people there and things like that. Ancient connections are all archaeological digs. So, and the fun thing about it is I actually use this. I've used this twice now to pinpoint an ancestral connection. And one of them's on Y-DNA, which is the same concept applies. So I'm going to tell you what it was. I had an ancestor that was rumored to be from one of 2 places in France. Okay, I know they were French, they're Acadian. Okay, so they were rumored to be from one of 2 places, and there's no church records because we're back beyond that. The closest ancient connection that I had, so your closest one in time is your first one. The closest ancient connection that I had was 9 kilometers away from the location that my ancestor was supposed to have been from in France.
Wow.
I know. And it was in an ancient Roman burial area along the Roman road. And I'm like, oh, wow. I mean, that was just like, okay, is that proof? No, but man, it's sure evidence, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
How
So,
fun.
so these are fun, and you can look, and it tells you something. I mean, it's not just fun; it also tells you where your ancestors. We know that this person in your shared ancestral haplogroup, where they were in 8250 BCE. Now that's before the current era. So if you add 2000, that's years ago. So 10,250 years ago, they were in Ukraine. Your shared
Cool.
ancestor. Yeah. So the burial is on the left, you're on the right, and the shared ancestor is at the top. So is that
How
not cool?
fun.
I know.
Yes.
So that helps you too. People today are matching you from England and Scotland and the UK, right?
Right.
But your shared ancestor, go to your first shared ancestor, your ancient connections up here. Go to your first one in the top row on
For,
the left. Right there. Yeah. Okay. So that will be your closest one in time to you, because they get older as you go across the. So your oldest one is always at the bottom, and your closest in time is always the top left. So what this tells you is that burial was about 4,700 years ago. Okay,
okay.
and your common ancestor with them is this haplogroup that was this it's your base haplogroup with that person. So it was before 1900 BCE, which is basically 4,000 years ago. So it's around then that your shared ancestor was in Croatia.
Okay. Well, hold on a second. The dig was in Croatia, right?
Yes,
So would the shared ancestor be in Croatia too? Do we make that assumption?
it very very likely. So what I do is I go across these people, these
Mm.
digs, and I make a little list, okay? And because we know where the haplogroup was formed, because you can go to that haplogroup and find out where it was formed, the common haplogroup. That's what you just scrolled up. You can see it down
That
there.
this here?
Yeah.
Oh,
When you scroll up, you see it here. See?
uh-huh.
Okay.
Okay.
So you can go to that haplogroup and learn more about it and see when it was formed and where.
And where do we go to get that to learn more about that haplogroup?
Any place, some of these are clickable, but you can also enter it if you scroll. Look, the left corner, there's a search button. You can also enter just T2C1D1 there, or I think you can click on that. I'm not sure what's clickable and what's not actually.
We're
But
gonna do this just for grins and giggles.
right. And now if you go up to the haplogroup story for that haplogroup, see, it tells you that haplogroup story.
Ah,
Okay.
good to know.
Yeah. So everybody beneath this haplogroup story, now you're seeing that you've got Germany and England and other countries here, and you can look and get a more complete and look at all these branches. And you're one of those branches down there at the very bottom.
One of these little itty bitty
Yep, yep. One of those
Yep.
branches. The point being that you can use the ancient connections where they were and when the common ancestor lived to kind of piece together where your ancestors were, your common ancestor with that person was at a specific time. So is there a little work to it? Yeah, there is. But so then what I do is I'm like, okay, they were living in this part of Europe and then they found their way to England. What historically happened? Was it the Anglo-Saxon? Was it Normans? Was it Celtic? Who was it? Who came? What does where they're found now in England? Are they in the Highlands of Scotland? Or where are they now? And where were they then? And what historical event happened? If they were in Normandy, for example, and then they were found in England, so now we have William the Conqueror in 1066 and all the Normans came over, right? So we can kind of piece together to some extent what happened to our ancestors based on these ancient connections.
I always say migrations and motivations. Why did they move?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's play with this one.
Oh, this is so much fun. So this is your time tree, and we're back to you, right? Yes. Okay.
Yep.
I just want to make sure we're back to your haplogroup. That haplogroup itself was formed about 287 BCE or about 2,200 years ago. So that's when that mutation, and this is going to change in time. And how can it change? Well, as more people test and we have more testers and we learn more, it may shift forward or backward in time somewhat. So what this tells you is other people in the same haplogroup on the right, the people that have one line, okay, that go over to a globe.
Huh?
So that tells you that there's one tester, there's no other person in that cluster, so they're unique for now, and it tells you their haplotype, and it tells you that they self-reported in that location and they didn't report anything. That's why it's unknown. But if you come down to the next one, their maternal origin is in the UK and there's a different haplotype, but it's not showing a cluster. So there aren't multiple people in that haplotype. I'll talk to you just a little more about haplotype in just a minute when we get down there. So now you have somebody that's brick-walled in the United States, okay, like 3/4 of us are. Then you have two more people down here that didn't put anything for their origins, okay. But then you have this really big group. So now scroll. And I'm guessing, are you in this group? Nope, you're not. You're in a different group. Okay, that's okay. Let's use your little group down here.
Is this me?
Yes, that's you. You're always the pink profile person or red
Okay.
profile person. So these groupings with the little bracketing around them with the F numbers there, that's yours. The F number is your haplotype cluster number. So these are people who match you exactly. So everybody here shares the same haplogroup, but not everybody has the same downstream mutations. Remember, we talked about some that aren't reliable enough to
Right.
form a haplogroup. So you have one person here that's in your same haplotype cluster. So but they don't know anything if there's a United States and an unknown. So there's only two people in that cluster. So that's not probably helpful in terms of where that your cluster comes from. And then there's another cluster from your haplogroup here, which is the C1A. So there's only two clusters in that haplogroup.
Can you explain the difference between a haplogroup and a haplotype?
Yes. Both of these clusters are in the haplogroup T2C1D1C1A. But they have mutations so they all have the mutations for that haplogroup. Okay. But there's two groups within that match each other. Exactly. And one of those.
So these are like branches off of this T group?
Yes. So
Okay.
there's two branches, but the mutations aren't reliable enough to form a haplogroup. Okay. So we want people to know that you have exact matches within that haplogroup. So those are probably where you want to focus the most when you go and look on your match page at FamilyTreeDNA. You'll see the cluster number there, the F number. They're all F, and no, there's no relevance to their number. They're just randomly generated when a group forms. So until the second person tested, let's say that you were by yourself, like these people up here are by themselves, okay?
Right.
Let's say you were by yourself, and then an unknown cousin tests, or your child tests, or your mother tests, or someone else tests, then either one of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to get a new haplogroup, okay, because more people have tested, or you're going to get a haplotype cluster, depending on what the mutations are and the circumstances. But until then, you're by yourself. So the more people that test, the better, the more people you get in your cluster, the more people you match, but also the better refined we can make this haplogroup birth date. So if you fly over your haplogroup again, you can see that was born where the big main haplogroup was born, what did we say, 2,000 years ago? I forgot now. This one was born in 1736 CE, current era, so that's the year 1736-ish. So your common ancestor with whoever else matches you in this haplotype cluster here is maybe findable, 1736.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff.
This is your new haplogroup. Before that, you only had the old haplogroup. And that haplogroup was formed so long ago that you really can't look at that and say this might be findable. Doesn't mean some of these people aren't findable. It's just how do you focus? And that's what the lady was so breathlessly telling me. I had 47 matches before, but now I had only 3 in my cluster and I knew where to focus and I found the answer. That's what she was breathlessly telling me running down the hall at Roots Tech.
That's so fun.
Yeah. So if this is your old haplogroup and you match all these people, but now we can give you this level of refinement that shows you just the people in your cluster off your haplogroup, that's where you need to focus.
Do we need to worry about any of this stuff right now?
Actually, it's really cool because it helps you. You can do full screen. You can, if you play with the vertical spacing here. So let's say you want to, it scrunches it up or moves it out either way. So if you, I go the other way, all the way, and then I take screenshots and send them to people. So, or you can do the sharing. So yeah, it's just, there's different things to do. I encourage people to go in and play with the display options, and you can't break this. You cannot break it. So I encourage people to go in, click on things, become familiar with all the options, look at everything that's there. What does it do? What does it tell you? There's a lot of things you can mouse over where there's information that we've included. So there's all kinds of good stuff.
So I just want to be clear, this is not me.
It is
This is my ancestor, right?
yes. And you're the
And
pink icon.
I'm the one down here
Hmm.
because I was noticing that the haplogroup number is not exactly the same because I have a 1C, 1A on the end, and this one has just the 1C.
Right.
Or C1. Excuse
And if you look up in the text, which everybody doesn't read because we're all excited to see the pictures, it says every pink icon represents a genetic
there we go.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
All right, let's move on to match time.
so this is your match time tree. And what this shows you is if you remember on the time tree, it showed you the haplotype clusters. These are the people on your match list that are in those haplotype clusters. So where before you just saw their country and it was a group, now you see their names. So you can go back to your match list. And now down here in your haplotype right there, there's Veronica and Patsy and Joanne and Stephen in these two clusters. So these are the people that you're going to match the most closely. So you need to find your cluster. And now we've reduced in terms of genealogy, where you want to start is with these closer matches to see if you can find your common ancestor and then move to your more distant matches.
So I might go look at their trees to see if they have, and then kind of piece together their tree with my tree to figure out exactly the connection.
Yes.
Very cool.
So obviously, you're not always going to be able to do this because surnames change. But if you don't go and try, you'll never be able to find it. I'm going to give you an example of one that worked that was absolutely amazing. And I couldn't have done it without my cousin. Okay. I knew who my ancestor was, Phoebe Crumley, and I knew who her mother was, but I didn't know beyond that. My cousin, we had a match and she contacted me. It's not my direct line. It's one of my ancestral lines that I manage that kit. So she contacted me and she says, I think we might have a connection here. And I'm like, yeah, I think we do too. But the surname, I don't recognize anything. So here's what she told me. She said, they were Quaker and mine were Quaker too. Okay. So we have that. And she goes, I tracked where I found my ancestor, the whole church. I tracked the entire church where I found my ancestor in I think it was late 1700s. And I found out that the whole church moved from Middletown, New Jersey. And I'm like, what? I'm like, but mine's in Virginia to New Jersey. That doesn't, that Virginia is not a migration path from New Jersey,
Yeah.
She's like, I think I found your ancestor. I'm like, seriously? She goes, yeah, look here. In the church records, they baptized 5 children the same day, and one of them's name was Phoebe. And then there's a Jotham, and my ancestor Phoebe married Jotham Brown, but they said they recorded it as Jotham Bart, and I think it's misrecorded. And so, sure enough, we get the original records, and guess what? She found my ancestor.
Fabulous.
And how'd she do it? She had a hint. She's like, Quaker, Quaker. Where did the Quakers come from? So she tracked all those people in that church until she found out where they came from. And then she had a place. And then she went and looked in the records there. And then she found it, along with my ancestor.
I too have Quakers, and they are fabulous records.
Mm-hmm. So, shame on me. I looked at it and went, that's nice, but Pennsylvania, the surname I don't recognize. Of course, females, and I just didn't pursue it. She nailed it, not only her own, but mine too. So, yeah, so it's not a gimme, but listen, without that information, I could never have solved it. I could never have solved it. It's too far back for autosomal to reach reliably. And I couldn't have solved it. And now that we know who the ancestors are, now of course, I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, there's someone else I matched through the same ancestor out of New Jersey. Now that I know who to look for, but before autosomally, before I knew
Yeah.
who to look for, there was no way to piece it together. So yeah, it's amazing.
Let's talk about ancestral path.
Okay, so this is for the geeks among us, okay? The top one is your haplogroup. Yes. So this is your path backwards in time. And it shows you at the top the detailed path, and then it shows you for each haplogroup when it was formed, the ages, how many descendant haplogroups there are, how many modern descendants there are, how many ancient connections there are. So it gives you more information about your haplogroup and the upstream haplogroups. It's like literally for the geeks among us. The scientists, we put this page in because it's like we use it all the time. You might not, but we do. And it's rather than trying to track back on the time tree, you can just come here and see it all in a nice table.
Okay, very cool. Let's talk about projects because I know you can get into projects for Y-DNA and,
This is
anything over here.
so fun because what this is it looks at the places that people with this haplogroup projects they've joined. And it says, you might be interested in joining this project too. The first one up here is the haplogroup T2 mtDNA project. I recommend joining that. There's or administrators with a specific interest in that haplogroup. They probably group people. And then there's others as well. So you can see that two of these people belong to the French Heritage DNA Project. Now, they might belong to it because they might be males and they belong because their father was French. It doesn't tell you why these people joined this project. It just tells you that these people are in this project. But I can tell you for sure that these top two here are T2 mitochondrial DNA and haplogroup T full sequence DNA. So these are the two projects that would be based on your haplogroup alone. And then the rest of them are probably based on where somebody's ancestor was from, or even they joined up for autosomal or Y-DNA or some other reason, or maybe for mitochondrial. So you need to evaluate those more closely.
Okay.
Okay.
Scientific stuff looks like more geek stuff for you.
No, actually, yes and no. But here's the important part, okay, that I want to share with you is if you look at this, there's a range for every one of these haplogroups. So haplogroup T2C1D1C1, if you look at the range, the most likely in that range is at 287 BCE, but there's a range for that. So it could be earlier or later. And people say, well, I know my common ancestor with Susie was born in 1700 and it's got it at 1650. That's not right. They need to include my genealogy. But if you come here and look at the range, it's probably in the range. So this shows you that they have to come up with a date for the time tree. But as the date changes, so will this range. So as we learn more and more people test.
This looks a little bit like the bell curve that we see at DNA Painter when we click
Absolutely.
into the
And I want
organ.
you to go up here and click on variant. See the age, you're on age estimate. I want you. So every haplogroup, remember I talked about the mutations that happen that cause a haplogroup to be formed? Well, if you look at these different haplogroups, it shows you the mutations and what they are and how the confidence level of those haplogroups, how they're weighted because we weight them. And remember, we decide some aren't reliable enough to be used to form a haplogroup. So what you're actually seeing here is the scientific trail of breadcrumbs from your
Okay.
ancestors, okay? And as you scroll towards the bottom, you'll see it goes from contemporary all the way back. And this is what the earlier little bar was showing you is the main haplogroups. This is showing you all the haplogroups and the mutations from you to mitochondrial Eve. You're at the top. It is a geeky thing, but I want you to think of these as breadcrumbs. These are your breadcrumbs. So that's pretty much that.
Fabulous. Anything we want to play with here?
Well, this is actually fun. So let's see how closely related we are, okay? So this is your haplogroup up here, except you have an A on the end of yours. I don't quite know how we got back to there, but this is close enough. So search a haplogroup, okay? Type in J1C2F. Okay.
Is that the whole thing?
Yep, that's mine.
Okay.
So here's how closely related we are on that line, okay? There's me on the left. That's the one that you just typed in. There's your base haplogroup. It's not your actual one, but it doesn't matter because our common ancestor is still haplogroup JT, which split. One went to T and one went to J, those breadcrumbs. And if you went back to that other thing, it would show you exactly what the variants are, right? And then our shared haplogroup was 4,300 BC or 43,000 BCE or about 45,000 years ago. So everybody's related.
That's crazy.
I know. So if you want to
That's
know how closely related you are to, I don't know, your father's mother, that's you have to test your father or his sisters or brother. But you just put into any two haplogroups and it'll show you not only how you're related, but your shared path, the different paths, the shared path. And then if you're really interested, you can go over and say, where was haplogroup JT formed? And look at haplogroup JT to see where your common ancestors were. So it's really fun.
That's an interesting question. So my father has since passed away, and let's pretend he had a brother, but he didn't. But a brother could test mitochondrial DNA, and it would be exactly the same, yes?
Yes, because the mother gives her mitochondrial DNA to both sexes of her children. So all of the children can test for the mother. In the next generation, your father didn't pass his mitochondrial DNA on, neither did his mythical brother, but his sisters would have passed their mitochondrial DNA on to their children. So let's say your father's gone, he didn't have a brother, but he had two sisters, they're gone, but they had children, any of their children can test, or their
Good.
daughter's children. So yeah, that's exactly how you do it.
Thank you.
And you know what I do? I offer scholarships. So if they're not interested, I explain to them why this is important. But then I say, I have a DNA testing scholarship for you if you'll take the test. That means I'm paying for it. You can control your results. I only ask I want to see them. I ask for access to see them. That's what I want. So they can join a project to do that. You can form a personal family project so they can join. Or some people just say, fine, here's my kit number and password. I don't even want, this is for you. But that's what I do is I offer testing scholarships.
All right, hold that thought because I want to get back to that in just a second. We're on the last thing. Do we need to even look at the classic tree?
Well, the classic tree shows things differently. This is your more traditional tree. The time tree's new. FamilyTreeDNA, in essence, created the time tree because it shows you haplogroups on in the branching. This is more traditional, and it does show some things that the time tree does not. For example, I want you to mouse over one of the stars over here. See the down.
Stars. This here?
See, look. So that says this is the most likely topology, meaning the branching structure, based on the currently available data. And it has 10 stars out of 10. So that means that this is very, this is probably not going to change, this haplogroup, okay? And then down here beneath it are the clusters that we saw on the tree. Those are your haplotype clusters, and there's their F numbers, and then it shows you all in one place. So if you're looking for something more compact and you're looking for confidence levels on how the branches were, and there's the mutation that formed it right there. So the T up in the top, T7258C right there to the right, that's the mutation that formed that branch.
Okay.
And then the mutation that formed the next branch is there. So this has a lot of information all in one place for you, including, the confidence, the stars. You can break it out. Like there's a plus sign, that means there's more, like that one. So anytime and that's the one we looked at a minute ago with the Native American flag. So you can collapse it, you can expand it. It has confidence, it has mutations, it's all in one. And this is your more traditional view of a haplotree, a scientific view. That's what PhyloTree looked like, for example, the old one. So the time tree and these other new trees are FamilyTreeDNA creations to make it easier for the consumer to see the time portion. And then this is your more traditional classic tree.
Wow, what a great, great education here. Thank you so much. Now, you had mentioned the scholarship, and or the next question I was going to ask is, where do people find you? Or I know you have a website and a blog.
I do, but for scholarships, you don't need me. Well, my family needs me. I want them to find me. But what I do is I look on my match list. So let's say I'm trying to find a tester for, actually, you know what? My grandmother, of all the lines I don't have, I just can't. So I go and I look on Ancestry. I look on my heritage. I look at my matches on FamilyTreeDNA. I look at relatives at Roots Tech when that's available, and I've written about it on my blog, because you can look at people that were attending Roots Tech either virtually or in person, and if they descend, it compares your tree to their tree. If they descend from the person whose DNA you're trying to find, be it Y or mitochondrial, then you're like, oh, cool. And then you can message them, and I message them, and I say, have you tested at FamilyTreeDNA? And if they've said yes, I say, have you taken the mitochondrial test? And if they say yes, then now we're engaging in collaboration. If they say no, I say, do you know about mitochondrial DNA? And then, and I often give them links to my blog so they know I'm not a crazy person. Well, I'm crazy, but genealogically crazy, So, and then I say, well, this is what it could tell us. Would you be interested in testing? I have a scholarship for someone who descends appropriately from our common ancestor, and you do. And then I explain what that means. It means I pay for everything and they get the results too. And because I can't test for it, if I could test for it myself, I would. And if you were to tell me there was a book that I could order for whatever the cost of that is, today, I don't even know, 100 and something, they go on sale. So let's say 119, I don't know. If there was a book that I could order for $119, I could maybe solve that brick wall. Trust me, I'd have that book overnighted, and so would every genealogist. And you don't know what you don't know. You just don't know what you don't know. And the only way to find it is through appropriately testing the mitochondrial and also the Y line for the males in the lineage. And the other thing I do is I scout the projects. So, for example, on my Acadian line, there's a project called Acadian Amerindian Project. I know because I'm one of the administrators. We have mitochondrial DNA of people known Acadians, and they put their earliest known ancestors in testers. So you may find somebody that lists your earliest known ancestor already. So you may not need to just WikiTree. If you go to WikiTree, to your ancestor, there may be people who have said, oh, I descend from this through the mitochondrial line, or even if it's upstream, I descend from their grandmother through the mitochondrial line. WikiTree populates it appropriately on the tree. Same for Y-DNA. Y-DNA, the Estes project. I don't have a Y chromosome, but trust me, I've pestered every Estes man that I could find. And there's a project for that. So you might find people who descend from your ancestors. So you may not even need to test. That may already be someone who has tested that you can find in a number of ways. But when I can't, that's exactly what I do, is I use these resources to find people in different lineages that descend appropriately that I can offer scholarship to obtain that information for me. And then some people that do this, they also offer to do a Zoom call or to do after the results are in, to do exactly what you and I did, just went through, what we didn't go through. And of course, is your match list. There's also a matches map on your dashboard at FamilyTreeDNA. It's a map that shows everyone who put their earliest known ancestor, either exact matches or differences up to 3 differences, where they are in the world. That matches map is really useful. So there's things like that you can do that will help your genealogy and help theirs too. And that's what I do. And, especially with relatives at Roots Tech. Now, there's 3 levels of mitochondrial DNA matching. At the upper left-hand corner, see the mtDNA HBR1? That's only a small part, and they don't offer that test anymore. It used to be they offered 3 tests, the kind of the HBR1, and then there's a down arrow there, click on that. So there's your full sequence. And so what this is telling you is your exact matches. Oh, look, you have one in Australia.
I know, right?
So what that probably tells you is if you moused over that, it would tell you the tester's name and where their ancestors, their earliest known ancestor, if they put that in. But I'm guessing, given that when we looked at your haplotype cluster, that you had to Scotland and you had, I think it was in England in your haplotype cluster, that one of these is also the Australia one is the person from there, and because they may know where their ancestor was from because that's how we actually broke through a brick wall on one of my lines. The person in it was New Zealand for me, but they knew where their ancestor was from. And because they were populated later in time, they knew where their ancestor was from. They told me the church in England, in Gisborne, and we went to that church in England and found my ancestor's birth record. So
Wow. Very
yeah,
cool.
so if I was you, given the red is an exact match, if you look at the legend here, the greens are three-step differences. Not to say you should ignore them, but always start with the red. So you've got one in the United States, which may mean they're brick-walled, or it may mean they didn't know at the time. So always ask, because they may have found more. Oh, you've got three of them here. Genealogical information that they didn't know at the time, and they've just never updated the earliest known ancestor. So
Yeah.
what
Now
what
let's talk about that for a second. What does it mean? A one step, two step, three step?
so that's how many mutations different you have than these
Uh,
people.
from the common ancestor to the two test takers.
Right, between you and someone else. But so people are like, "Oh, well, if I can't find my exact matches, I can never find that." So I want to throw a monkey wrench in that for you. So there's these things called heteroplasmies, and they are mutations in process. So in your mitochondrial DNA, when they test it, you have lots of them in every cell. They provide energy for the cell. That's their actual purpose. It's as opposed to genealogy, which genealogists think that's their actual purpose, but it's not. So they test, and if you have some of your cells have a mutation at one location and some don't, they give you both of those. So it's called a heteroplasmy. So you can have a heteroplasmy show up because you have over 20% of a mutation, and your brother cannot have that heteroplasmy because he's at 19%. Okay. So
Okay.
what I'm telling you is don't automatically discount matches that aren't exact. Because here we have exact that are red, one step difference, which is one mutation difference between the two of you, which is orange, two is yellow, three is green. I don't ignore them. I start with the closest first. And because we
Okay.
now have haplotype clusters, you can see who matches you truly exactly, even with the mutations that are less reliable.
What I didn't tell you was my mother was adopted.
Oh,
So these red matches may be very helpful.
yes. And what you want to do is, of course, compare their trees, not just their trees for people, compare their locations. Ask if they have, they may or may not have a tree uploaded. I contact them, ask them, if they don't, can they upload one? If they have a tree someplace else, where is it? If all they list is their earliest known ancestor, go to WikiTree. Take that ancestor, go to WikiTree and see what's over there about it.
Yeah. I actually have, before DNA was even a thing, I found her biological family. So I have some information, but
Ah,
that line is probably the least researched because of first of all, you know how hard it is to trace women, and B, adoption on top of that, and,
mhm.
all the little secrets that go along with adoptions, you know.
Well, and you don't
And
even
so,
get those family stories about Native American. Even if they're wrong, you don't get them, right?
yeah, right.
Yeah, so
Beautiful. All right. If somebody wants to buy a DNA kit, they buy it at FamilyTreeDNA, right? If they want to buy a mitochondrial?
yeah, and what I recommend doing is to buy the mitochondrial and then buy the family finder, which is the autosomal along with it, because first of all, there's bundle pricing, but because then you get both to work with. Because if it's close in time, you may match that mitochondrial person also autosomally. So, it gives you something to work with. Also helps you find your matches for other lines, if you're looking for a match like for your father's, mother's, whatever. So,
Now, if you've already tested at Ancestry or MyHeritage
yes,
and you download that raw DNA data and upload it to FamilyTreeDNA, that's not going to give you the mitochondrial, correct?
correct.
But does it save you a couple bucks to just buy the mitochondrial then? Or do you still, I know there's some slight differences. So,
Well, here's what I would suggest. First of all, MyHeritage, it's actually a company to company transfer, so you don't have to download that file to upload it. Okay.
okay.
Okay. But having said that, look at the pricing before you buy. If you do an upload from the other company, if you want the advanced features, which you do, like the ethnicity, like the good stuff, if you will. Well, it's all good, but the advanced stuff. It's a $19 unlock. So look at the combination of the mitochondrial and whatever family finder package they have. Because here's what happens. When you upload from any place, they use a different chip and it's almost a lot of the same, but they have to use something called imputation to kind of, bridge the gaps. And they do a really good job, but it's not exactly the same. It'll be fine for your close matches, but the further distant you get, it's a little different. So if you're close in terms of the money and, just buy the family finder and the mitochondrial. If you upload, make sure to do it to the same kit. So don't upload to one kit and do your mitochondrial and then have a different kit because they can't merge them for you after you've done that. Okay. So the reason I say that is because they have a feature called advanced matching where you can say, okay, show me everybody that matches me on mitochondrial and also matches me on autosomal. So, but if they're in two different kits, they can't do that. So either upload first and then order the mitochondrial on that uploaded kit, or order the mitochondrial and then upload to the mitochondrial kit. So just make sure you didn't do it separately. So
yeah, that for those who might be confused by that, for every autosomal DNA kit, right, you have to have a different login and kit number. At least that's the way it used to be. I don't know if they've merged them all into one, but
they have not. So kits are a little different because they have the 3 different kinds of tests. It's possible to, like for a man, you could actually buy 3 different kits, but you don't want to do that. You want to make sure you order the whatever test onto the same kit number because you do have to sign in separately.
okay.
So,
very good.
sorry, I know that's like
I know.
They're the only one that has the 3 kinds of DNA, so it's the only place you have to worry about that.
Yeah, really. Okay, so if they want to learn more from you, where do they find your blog? I know you have a blog.
I do. It's got 1,752 or 3 free articles. They're all free. It's DNAexplained.com. And I've been writing since 2012 there. And my goal is to make it like DNA for genealogy for normal air breathing humans so they can understand it. And there's a whole tab at the top about mitochondrial DNA. And I am writing now because we just released Mitotree. I have a whole thing about Mitotree. When it was born, it's like birthing my baby after 5 years, And
Good job.
it was a long pregnancy, let me tell you. So I'm going to be writing about each one of the Discover features. I'm going to be writing an article about each one of those and how to use them and what it means for genealogy. And I write about 1 article a week. But then I also, on Sundays, I write about my ancestors. So you may or may not want to read them. A lot of people use that they're not even their ancestors as case studies. How did you solve this? Where did you look?
Yeah.
So they're fun that way. And of course, I roll DNA into those too sometimes. So, of course.
Wow. Well, my mind is blown, and I'm sure if anybody has made it to the end of this video after an hour and 20 some minutes, gosh, thank you so much. This has been wildly helpful. And for those who want to learn, I think this probably helped a lot, especially with all the new technology and new tree and all the hard work that you put in for the last umpteen bazillion years. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. And there's also a Facebook group for mitochondrial DNA. It's called, I think it's in my last blog article. I think it's called FamilyTreeDNA mtDNA group, I think. It used to be mine, and then I bequeathed it to them because I'm a genealogist, because it really needed to be the company where where everybody can go and get information from them. So there's that on social media where a lot of people do a lot of discussing about this too, ask questions. So
Bravo. Bravo. Thank you so much.
Thank you.